The rain fell like tiny needles against Rosa's face as she stood outside the fancy restaurant, watching rich people walk past her like she was invisible. Her daughter Sophia pressed closer to her side, both of them shivering in their thin coats. The smell of expensive food drifted from the restaurant, making Rosa's empty stomach twist with hunger. 3 months ago, Rosa had been a different person. She worked at the clothing factory, making enough money to pay rent and buy groceries. She wasn't rich, but she was proud. She could look at herself in the mirror and know she was taking care of her daughter the right way. Then the factory closed down overnight. Just like that, hundreds of workers lost their jobs. No warning, no help, just a paper notice taped to the door. Rosa tried everything. She applied for jobs at stores, restaurants, offices. She stood in long lines at the unemployment office. She sold her jewelry, her TV, even her winter coat, but nothing worked. The bills kept coming, and her savings disappeared like water in the desert. Last week, her landlord told her she had 5 days to pay rent or leave. 5 days to find money she didn't have. That's when Rosa started doing something she never thought she would do. She started asking for food from restaurants, not begging on the street corner with a cardboard sign. That felt too much like giving up completely. Instead, she would wait outside nice restaurants and politely ask people if they had leftover food they weren't going to eat. It was still humiliating, but somehow it felt less like begging and more like recycling. Most people ignored her. Some gave her dirty looks. A few kind souls handed her a few dollars or a leftover sandwich. But Rosa needed more than pocket change. She needed enough money to keep her apartment, to keep Sophia in school, to keep their small world from falling apart completely. Tonight was different, though. Tonight, Rosa was desperate in a way that scared her. This morning, she had opened her wallet to find exactly $3.27. Not enough for dinner? Not enough for breakfast tomorrow? Definitely not enough for rent? Sophia had been asking why they only ate peanut butter sandwiches lately, and Rosa was running out of excuses. As she watched the restaurant's front door, Rosa noticed a man in an expensive suit walking out. He was older, maybe in his 50s, with gray hair and the kind of confident walk that came from never worrying about money. He carried a white takeout box, probably containing food that cost more than Rosa spent on groceries in a week. The man walked a few steps, then stopped at a trash can. Rosa watched in horror as he lifted the lid, ready to throw away the entire box of food. That food could feed her and Sophia for 2 days. Maybe 3 if she was careful, before she could stop herself. Rosa was moving. Her feet carried her across the wet sidewalk, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. She didn't even realize she was holding Sophia's hand until her daughter stumbled trying to keep up. "Excuse me, sir," Rosa heard herself say. Her voice barely louder than a whisper. The man turned around, his hand still holding the takeout box above the trash can. Up close, Rosa could see he had kind eyes behind expensive glasses. But she could also see the surprise on his face, the way his body tensed when he saw her and Sophia standing there in their worn clothes. Rosa's mouth went dry. What was she doing? This was crazy. This man probably thought she was going to rob him or something. She almost turned around and walked away, but then she felt Sophia's small hand squeeze hers, and she remembered the empty refrigerator at home. "I'm sorry to bother you," Rosa said, forcing herself to speak louder. "But I noticed you were about to throw away that food, and I was wondering. She stopped, the words catching in her throat. How do you ask a stranger for their garbage without sounding completely pathetic? The man lowered the takeout box and really looked at her for the first time. His eyes moved from Rosa's face to Sophia's, taking in their thin coats and worn shoes. Rosa felt her cheeks burn with embarrassment, but she didn't look away. "I have a daughter," Rosa said, her voice stronger now. "We're going through a hard time, and I hate to ask, but can I have your scraps, sir?" The words hung in the air between them like a bridge Rosa couldn't cross back over. She had said it. She had actually asked a complete stranger for his leftover food. A part of her wanted to disappear into the sidewalk, but another part of her felt strangely relieved. At least now she knew she would do anything to take care of Sophia. The man didn't answer right away. Instead, he looked at Rosa with an expression she couldn't quite read. It wasn't pity, exactly, and it wasn't disgust. It was something else, something that made Rosa feel like he was really seeing her, not just her situation. "What's your name?" he asked quietly. "Rosa," she replied, surprised by the question, "and this is my daughter Sophia." The man smiled at Sophia, who had been hiding behind Rosa's leg. "How old are you, Sophia?" "8," Sophia whispered, still clinging to her mother. The man looked back at Rosa, and she saw something change in his expression. The polite distance that rich people usually kept melted away, replaced by something warmer and more human. "My name is David," he said, extending his hand to Rosa. "And I think we need to talk." Rosa stared at his outstretched hand, unsure what to do. In her experience, when rich people wanted to talk, it usually meant they wanted to lecture her about getting a job or pulling herself up by her bootstraps. But something about David's tone made her think this might be different. She shook his hand, noticing how warm it was compared to her cold fingers. "I don't want charity," she said quickly. We're hungry, and I saw you were throwing away the food anyway." David nodded slowly. "I understand, and I respect that. But I'm not offering charity. I'm offering something else." He paused, looking around at the busy street. "Would you and Sophia like to get some hot chocolate? There's a coffee shop down the street that's much warmer than standing out here in the rain." Rosa hesitated. Every instinct told her to be careful. She didn't know this man, and she had Sophia to think about. But she was also cold and tired and desperate, and the idea of sitting somewhere warm while Sophia got something hot to drink sounded like heaven. "Okay," she said finally. "But just for a few minutes." As they walked down the street together, Rosa couldn't shake the feeling that this moment was going to change everything. She didn't know how or why, but something about the way David had looked at her when she asked for his scraps told her that her life was about to take a turn she never could have imagined. The rain kept falling, but for the first time in months, Rosa didn't mind getting wet. She was walking toward something new, something that felt like hope, and she was ready to find out what it was. The coffee shop was warm and cozy, a complete opposite to the cold rain outside. Rosa had never been inside a place like this before. Everything looked expensive, from the fancy coffee machines to the leather chairs. She felt out of place in her worn clothes, but David didn't seem to notice or care. He found them a quiet table in the corner and asked what Sophia would like to drink. When Sophia shyly asked for hot chocolate, David ordered the biggest size they had, plus a sandwich and cookies. Rosa started to protest, but David held up his hand. "Please," he said gently, "let me do this. When I was Sophia's age, I knew what it felt like to be hungry." Rosa looked at him in surprise. This man in his expensive suit had been hungry as a child? It was hard to believe, but something in his voice told her he was telling the truth. While they waited for the order, David asked Sophia about school. She was shy at first, but when he asked about her favorite subject, she lit up talking about math. Rosa watched her daughter's face brighten for the first time in weeks, and she felt a tightness in her chest. This was what Sophia used to be like all the time, before their world fell apart. When the food arrived, Sophia dove into her sandwich like she hadn't eaten in days, which Rosa realized with shame wasn't far from the truth. They had been living on peanut butter sandwiches and whatever free food Rosa could find. Watching her daughter eat a real meal made Rosa's eyes fill with tears. "Tell me about yourself," David said quietly, so Sophia wouldn't hear. "What did you do before?" "Before things got difficult?" Rosa wiped her eyes and took a sip of her coffee. It was the best coffee she had ever tasted, rich and warm and perfect. "I worked at Peterson's clothing factory. I was an assistant manager there for 6 years. I did the books, managed schedules, helped train new workers. I was good at my job." "What happened to the factory?" "They said business was slow. Then one day we came to work and found a notice on the door. Factory closed, all of us out of work, just like that." Rosa's voice got bitter. 6 years of my life, and they couldn't even tell us in person." David nodded slowly. "I'm sorry. That Must have been terrifying. It was. I had some savings, but not much. I thought I'd find another job quickly. I mean, I had experience, good references. But everywhere I applied, they said I was overqualified or underqualified, or they needed someone with different experience. She laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. Turns out, being good at your job doesn't mean much when there aren't any jobs. What about Sophia's father? Rosa's face hardened. He left when Sophia was 2, said he wasn't ready to be a father. Haven't seen him since? She looked at her daughter, who was now coloring on a napkin with crayons David had asked the waitress to bring. It's been just me and Sophia for 6 years. And I've done a good job until now? You're still doing a good job, David said firmly. You're doing whatever it takes to take care of your daughter. That's what good mothers do, Rosa studied his face. Why are you being so nice to us? I mean, I'm grateful, but I don't understand. People like you don't usually... She trailed off. Not sure how to finish the sentence. David was quiet for a moment, stirring his coffee. Can I tell you something? I've been rich for a long time now. 20 years ago, I started a computer company in my garage. I got lucky, worked hard, and eventually sold it for more money than I ever dreamed of having. That's amazing, Rosa. Saad, is it? David asked. Because lately I've been feeling like I've forgotten something important. I go to fancy dinners and charity events where rich people write checks and pat themselves on the back for helping the poor. But we never actually meet the people we're supposed to be helping. We never talk to them, never listen to their stories. We just throw money at problems from a distance. He looked at Sophia, who was showing her napkin drawing to her mother. When you asked me for my scraps tonight, it was the most honest conversation I've had in months. You didn't want my pity or my guilt money. You just wanted food for your daughter, and that made me realize something. What? That I've been wasting my money on the wrong things. I've been giving to big organizations that spend half their donations on office buildings and fancy fundraisers. But real help happens between real people, one conversation at a time. Rosa wasn't sure what to say. She had never heard a rich person talk like this before. The wealthy people she had encountered in her life had always seemed to live in a different world, one where problems could be solved with money and connections. I have an idea, David said, but I want to ask you something first. If you could have any job in the world, what would it be? Rosa almost laughed. Any job? Right now I'd take anything. Cleaning offices, stocking shelves, whatever pays the bills. No, I mean if you could choose anything. If money wasn't a problem and you could do whatever made you happy, what would that be? Rosa thought about it seriously. No one had asked her that question in years. I always wanted to have my own business, she said finally. When I was working at the factory, I used to dream about starting a small company that helped other businesses with their books and paperwork. I was good at that stuff, and I liked helping people organize their finances. That's a good dream, David said. What stopped you? Life, Rosa said simply. I had Sophia to think about, bills to pay. Starting a business takes time and money. I never had. It was easier to keep a steady job with benefits. David leaned forward. What if I told you there was a way to make your dream happen and help other people at the same time? I'd say you sound too good to be true, David smiled. Fair enough, but hear me out. I've been thinking about starting a program to help people who are struggling financially. Not just giving them money, but teaching them how to start small businesses, how to manage their finances, how to build something that lasts. That sounds wonderful, Rosa said. But what does that have to do with me? Everything, David said. I have money and connections, but I don't have something much more important. I don't have experience being poor. I don't know what it's really like to choose between paying rent and buying groceries. I don't know how the system works when you're on the bottom looking up. Rosa felt her heart starting to beat faster. What are you saying? I'm saying I need a partner. Someone who understands what it's like to struggle, who can help me figure out how to really help people instead of just throwing money at them. Someone who knows how to run a business but also knows what it's like to lose everything. You want me to work with you? I want you to work with me. I want to pay you a real salary to help me build something that actually makes a difference. And while we're building it, I want to help you start your own business on the side." Rosa stared at him. This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen to people like her. "I don't understand." "You don't even know me." "I know enough," David said. "I know you're willing to swallow your pride to feed your daughter. I know you. Worked your way up to assistant manager at a factory. I know you're smart and honest and you're not looking for a handout. That's more than I know about most of the people I work with." Sophia looked up from her drawing. "Mama, can we come back here tomorrow?" Rosa looked at her daughter, then at David, then back at her daughter. Her mind was spinning with possibilities and fears. This could be the answer to all her problems, or it could be too good to be true. "I need to think about it," she said finally. "Of course," David said. "But while you're thinking, let me give you something." He pulled out his wallet and handed her a business card with several $100 bills. "This is not charity. This is an advance on your first paycheck if you decide to take the job." Rosa stared at the money. It was more cash than she had seen in months. "I can't take this." "Yes, you can, and you will. Because Sophia needs dinner tomorrow, and you need time to think about my offer without worrying about where your next meal is coming from." As they walked back to the bus stop, Rosa felt like she was floating. For the first time in months, she had hope. Real hope? Not just the desperate kind that comes from having no other choice. Maybe this was the beginning of something new. Maybe her life was about to change in ways she never could have imagined. Maybe asking for scraps had been the best thing she had ever done. Rosa didn't sleep that night. She lay on her thin mattress, staring at the ceiling, listening to Sophia breathe softly beside her. The business card David had given her sat on the knitstand, glowing in the moonlight like it was made of gold. Next to it, the stack of bills he had given her felt both like a blessing and a burden. $300. More money than she had seen in months, but was it real? Was any of this real? In the morning light, would David Chun remember the poor woman who had asked him for scraps? Or would he realize he had made a mistake and disappear back into his rich man's world? Rosa had been fooled before. Right after she lost her job at the factory, a man in a suit had approached her at the unemployment office. He promised her a great job working from home, said she just needed to pay a small fee for training materials. She had given him her last $50 and never heard from him again. The memory still made her stomach turn, but David seemed different. The way he had looked at Sophia, the stories he told about his own childhood, the genuine interest in her life, it all felt real. Still, Rosa had learned the hard way that hope could be dangerous. When you had nothing left to lose, even small disappointments could break you. The next morning, Rosa walked Sophia to school and then took the bus to David's office building. She had called the number on his card and his assistant had scheduled a meeting for 10 o'clock. As the elevator climbed to the 20th floor, Rosa's hands started shaking. She had never been in a building this tall, this fancy. The carpet in the hallway probably cost more than her monthly rent. David's office was huge, with floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the entire city. Rosa could see the neighborhood where she lived, tiny and gray in the distance. It felt like looking at her life from space. "You came," David said, standing up from behind his desk. He sounded genuinely happy to see her. "I said I would," Rosa replied, though she had almost turned around 3 times in the elevator. "How did you sleep?" "I didn't." The honesty slipped out before she could stop it. "I kept thinking this was all some kind of dream," David smiled. "I understand. When I was your age, I wouldn't have believed it either. Please sit down. Can I get you some coffee?" As they sat across from each other, David explained his idea in more detail. He wanted to start a program that would give small loans to people who were struggling financially. Not big amounts, but enough to help them start tiny businesses, pay for job training, or just get back on their feet. "The problem with most programs like this," David said, "is that they're designed by people who have never been poor. They don't understand what real people actually need. They think everyone wants to start the next big tech company, When what most people really need is help buying a lawnmower so they can start a landscaping business. Rosa nodded. She knew exactly what he meant. When I was at the unemployment office, they kept trying to get me to apply for jobs I wasn't qualified for, or training programs that would take 2 years. They didn't understand that I needed work. Now, not later. Exactly. That's why I need you. I need someone who understands what it's really like. Someone who can help me figure out what people actually need, not what I think they need. David pulled out a folder full of papers. I've been working on this for months, but I know I'm missing something. I want you to be my partner in this. Help me design the program, interview people who need help, figure out how to make it work in the real world. Rosa looked at the papers, full of numbers and charts and legal language she didn't understand. I don't know anything about running a program like this. I'm not educated like you. I never even went to college. You have something better than college education, David said. You have experience. You know what it's like to be where these people are. That's worth more than any degree. And you'd really pay me for this? A real salary? $40,000 a year to start, plus benefits. Plus help setting up your own accounting business on the side. Rosa's head spun. $40,000 was more than she had made at the factory. It was more money than she had ever dreamed of earning. But doubt crept in like cold wind through a crack in the wall. Why me? She asked. There must be hundreds of people who could do this better than me. David leaned forward. Because those people have never stood outside a restaurant in the rain asking for scraps. They've never had to choose between paying rent and buying their child medicine. They've never felt the shame of asking for help and the relief of finding someone who treats them like a human being. But what if I mess it up? What if I'm not smart enough or good enough? Rosa, you managed to keep yourself and your daughter alive for 3 months with no income. You figured out how to stretch $1 until it screamed. You had the courage to ask a stranger for help when you needed it. If that's not smart and good enough, I don't know what is. 2 floors below, in the conference room, David's business partners were having their own conversation. Richard, his oldest friend and business partner, was pacing back and forth like a caged animal. Have you lost your mind? Richard asked. You want to hire some random woman off the street to help run a multi-million-dollar program? She's not. Random, David said when he joined them an hour later. She's exactly what we need. David, we've been friends for 20 years, said Linda, his other partner. I've never seen you make a decision this fast about anything. You always research everything to death. Now you want to bet everything on someone you met yesterday? I'm not betting everything. I'm investing in someone who has something we need. And what's that? Richard asked. Authenticity. Richard threw his hands up. Authenticity doesn't balance budgets, David. It doesn't write business plans or manage employees. What happens when the board finds out you hired someone with no experience? To run a program this important? Then I'll explain to them what I'm explaining to you. We've been trying to help poor people for years by throwing money at organizations that spend half their donations on overhead. We've funded programs designed by people who have never been poor for people they've never met. Maybe it's time we tried something different. Different is one thing, Linda said. Reckless is another. What do you really know about this woman? What if she's lying? What if she's not who she says she is? David had wondered the same thing. But then he remembered the look in Rosa's eyes when she asked for his scraps, the way she had held her daughter's hand, the pride in her voice when she talked about her work at the factory. Some things couldn't be faked. I know enough, he said finally. I know she's honest. I know she's desperate enough to ask for help, but proud enough to want to earn it. I know she loves her daughter more than her own pride. That's more than I know about most people I do business with. Back in David's office, Rosa was reading through the job description he had written for her. The words swam on the page: program coordinator, community outreach specialist, financial literacy advisor. It all sounded so official, so important. I need to think about this, she said finally. Of course. Take all the time you need. I mean, this is crazy, right? Yesterday I was asking for leftover food. Today you're offering me a job that could change my whole life. Things like this don't happen to people like me, David smiled. Maybe that's exactly why they should. As Rosa rode the bus home, she thought about all the reasons this could go wrong. David could change his mind. His partners could stop him. She could fail at the job and end up even worse off than before. But then she thought about Sophia, about the way her daughter's face had lit up in the coffee shop, about the possibility of a real future instead of just surviving day by day. That night, as she tucked Sophia into bed, her daughter asked, "Mama, are we going to be okay?" Rosa looked at her little girl's trusting face and made a decision. "Yes, baby. We're going to be more than okay. We're going to be great." For the first time in months, Rosa believed it might actually be true. Rosa's first day at work felt like stepping into someone else's life. She wore a borrowed business suit that Linda had given her, and her hands shook as she signed the employment papers. The small office David had set up for her seemed impossibly fancy, with a real wooden desk and a computer that was newer than any she had ever used. "You don't have to be nervous," David said, bringing her a cup of coffee. "We're figuring this out together." "Easy for you to say," Rosa replied, trying to smile. "You're not the one who feels like she's pretending to be someone she's not. You're not pretending, you're learning." There's a difference. The first week was overwhelming. Rosa had to learn new computer programs, understand legal documents, and sit in meetings where people used words she had never heard before. But slowly she began to understand what David was trying to build. It wasn't just about giving people money. It was about giving them tools and knowledge and hope. "I want to visit the places where people actually need help," Rosa told David during their second week. "I want to see what their lives look like." "That's exactly what we need to do," David agreed. "But I've never been to places like that. I wouldn't know where to start." "I do," Rosa said. "I know exactly where to start." Their first stop was the community center in Rosa's old neighborhood. The building was old and needed repairs, but it was filled with people trying to make their lives better. There were job training classes, free meals for families, and a small room where people could use computers to look for work. David looked around with wide eyes. He had donated money to places like this before, but he had never actually visited one. The people here weren't statistics or numbers on a report. They were real people with real problems and real dreams. "Most of these folks work 2 or 3 jobs," explained Mrs. Martinez, who ran the center. "They're not lazy. They're not looking for handouts. They just need a little help to get ahead." Rosa introduced David to people she had met during her months of unemployment. There was Carlos, who worked nights at a warehouse and was trying to save money to buy a food truck. There was Helen, a grandmother raising her 3 grandchildren while working at a grocery store. There was Tony, who had been laid off from his construction job and was learning computer skills so he could find office work. "What's the biggest problem you face?" David asked Helen. "Time and money," she said without hesitation. "I want to start a small daycare in my home. I love kids, I'm good with them, and there's a real need in the neighborhood. But I need money for licenses and supplies, and I need time to go through all the paperwork and training. When you're working 60 hours a week just to pay rent, there's no time for anything else." David took notes on everything. He asked questions Rosa never would have thought to ask, and he listened to the answers like each person was teaching him something important, which, Rosa realized, they were. "These people aren't asking for charity," David said as they drove back to the office. "They're asking for opportunity." "Now you're starting to understand," Rosa said. Over the next month, they visited homeless shelters, food banks, and job training centers. They talked to single mothers, unemployed factory workers, and elderly people living on fixed incomes. Each conversation taught them something new about what people really needed. Rosa found herself changing too. At first, she had been embarrassed to be seen with David in her old neighborhood. She worried people would think she was showing off or that she had forgotten where she came from. But as she watched David treat everyone with respect and genuine interest, she began to feel proud of the work they were doing. "You're different than I expected," Carlos told her one day. When I heard you got a job with some rich guy, I thought you'd become all stuck up, but you're still the same Rosa. I'm trying to be, Rosa said. This job isn't about changing who I am, it's about using who I am to help other people. But not everyone was supportive. During their third week, Rosa and David were presenting their findings to a group of potential investors. These were wealthy people who might fund their program, and Rosa was terrified. So you're telling us, said one man in an expensive suit, that we should give money to people based on the advice of someone who was homeless 3 weeks ago? Rosa felt her face burn with embarrassment. David started to answer, but she held up her hand. I wasn't homeless, she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. I was unemployed. There's a difference. And yes, you should listen to me, because I know things you don't know, such as the fact that most people who need help aren't drug addicts or criminals. They're people who got laid off, or got sick, or had some other emergency that wiped out their savings. They're people who want to work, but can't find jobs that pay enough to live on. The room was quiet. Rosa continued, gaining confidence with each word. You can throw money at this problem forever and never solve it if you don't understand what the real problem is. The real problem isn't that people are lazy or stupid. The real problem is that the system is set up to keep people poor. A small loan might help someone start a business, but if they don't know how to do their taxes or get proper insurance, they'll fail. If they don't know how to write a business plan or market their services, they'll fail. And you think you can teach them these things? Another investor asked. I think I can learn these things and then teach them. I think I can speak their language in a way that college-educated consultants can't. I think I can help them because I've been where they are. By the end of the presentation, 2 investors had committed to funding their program. David was beaming with pride, but Rosa felt drained. Standing up to those people had taken everything. She had. You were amazing in there, David said as they walked back to the office. I was terrified, Rosa admitted. Courage isn't about not being scared. It's about being scared and doing the right thing anyway. That night, Rosa called her sister, Anna, who lived across town. Anna had always been the successful one in the family, with a steady job and a nice house. When Rosa told her about the presentation, Anna was quiet for a long time. I'm proud of you, Anna finally said, but I'm also worried. What if this doesn't work out? What if you lose this job? You'll be back where you started, but now Sophia will have gotten used to a better life. I'll make it work, Rosa said. I have to. But what if you can't? What if you're in over your head? Rosa had asked herself the same questions every day since she started the job. But tonight, for the first time, she had a different answer. Then I'll figure it out. I've been through worse than this and survived. I can handle whatever comes next. As she hung up the phone, Rosa realized something had changed. A month ago, she had been a woman with no options, begging for scraps. Now she was a woman with choices, with skills, with a voice that people listened to. She was still scared, but she was no longer powerless. The next morning, Rosa walked into the office with her head high. She had work to do, people to help, and a life to build. For the first time in years, she couldn't wait to see what came next. 6 months later, Rosa stood in front of the same restaurant where she had met David, but this time everything was different. She was wearing her own business suit, not a borrowed one. Her hair was styled professionally, and she carried herself with the confidence of someone who belonged in whatever room she entered. Tonight, she was here for the grand opening celebration of their program, which they had named Second Chances. Sophia ran up to her wearing a pretty new dress that Rosa had bought with her own money. Mama, look! Mr. David brought his whole family to meet us. Rosa smiled as she watched her daughter chat excitedly with David's wife and teenage son. 6 months ago, Sophia had been a quiet, worried little girl who was afraid to ask for things she needed. Now she was confident and happy, back to being the bright, curious child she had always been. Are you ready for this? David asked, joining Rosa on the sidewalk. As ready as I'll ever be, Rosa replied. I still can't believe we actually did it. The numbers were impressive. In 6 months, Second Chances had helped 247 families. They had given out small loans ranging from $500 to $5,000. More importantly, they had provided training, support, and guidance to help people succeed. Carlos had gotten his food truck and was making enough money to support his family and hire 2 part-time employees. Helen had opened her daycare and had a waiting list of parents who wanted to enroll their children. Tony had completed his computer training and found a job at a local office, making more money than he had ever earned in construction. But the real success wasn't just in the numbers. It was in the stories. It was in the way people carried themselves differently when they had hope. It was in the way children smiled when their parents weren't constantly stressed about money. It was in the way communities started to believe in themselves again. "The board meeting is next week," David said quietly. "Are you nervous?" Rosa thought about it. The board of directors for David's company had been skeptical about second chances from the beginning. They had agreed to fund it for 6 months as a test. Now they would decide whether to continue the program or shut it down. "I'm not nervous," Rosa said, surprising herself. "I'm excited. We have proof that this works. We have real results with real people. The board likes numbers," David warned. "They're going to want to see profit margins and return on investment." "Then we'll show them numbers," Rosa said. "But we'll also show them something more important. We'll show them people." The celebration inside the restaurant was everything Rosa had hoped for. The room was filled with families who had been helped by second chances. There were small business owners who had started with loans from the program. There were people who had found jobs after getting help with training and resume writing. There were children who were doing better in school because their parents were less stressed about money. Mrs. Martinez from the community center stood up to give a speech. 6 months ago, people in our neighborhood didn't believe that anyone cared about us. We thought we were invisible to the people who had the power to help. But Rosa and David showed us that we were wrong. They didn't just give us money, they gave us respect. They listened to us. They treated us like partners, not charity cases. The applause was thunderous. Rosa felt tears in her eyes as she looked around the room. These weren't just clients or program participants. These were her friends, her community, her family. Later that evening, as the celebration was winding down, Rosa found herself talking to a young woman named Jessica who had just started the program. Jessica reminded Rosa of herself 6 months ago, desperate, scared, but determined to do whatever it took to take care of her family. "I don't know if I can do this," Jessica said. "Starting a cleaning business sounds impossible. I've never run a business before." "Neither had I," Rosa said. 6 months ago, I was asking strangers for leftover food. Now I'm running a program that helps hundreds of people. If I can do it, you can do it. But you're different. You're smart and educated. And confident. Rosa laughed. "I'm none of those things. I'm just someone who refused to give up. The only difference between me and you is that I got a chance to prove what I could do. Now I'm giving you the same chance. What if I fail? Then you'll learn from it and try again. That's what successful people do. They fail, they learn, they try again. The only real failure is not trying at all." A week later, Rosa stood in the boardroom of David's company, facing 12 serious-looking executives. She had prepared for this moment for days, but now that it was here, she felt calm and ready. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began, 6 months ago, you took a chance on an unusual program led by an unusual person. Today, I'm here to show you that your faith was justified." She clicked to her first slide, showing the program's results. "We've helped 247 families with a total investment of $1.2 million. Our loan repayment rate is 94%, which is higher than most traditional banks. But more importantly, we've helped people become self-sufficient." The board members nodded, impressed by the numbers. But Rosa wasn't finished. "These aren't just statistics," she continued. "These are real people with real families. Carlos Martinez now employs 3 people in his food truck business. Helen Rodriguez's daycare has taken 12 children off the waiting list for city childcare. Tony Wilson went from collecting unemployment to paying taxes on a $40,000 salary. She clicked to the next slide, showing pictures of families who had been helped by the program. Every one of these people was considered a bad investment by traditional standards. They had no collateral, no credit history, no business experience, but they had something more important. They had determination. One board member raised his hand. These results are impressive, but what about the long-term sustainability? Can this program continue to be profitable? It's already profitable, Rosa said, but not just financially. The return on investment includes reduced unemployment, benefits, increased tax revenue, and stronger communities. When people have hope, they contribute more to society. Another board member asked, "What makes this program different from other poverty assistance programs?" Rosa smiled. Because it was designed by people who understand poverty from the inside. We don't just give people money and hope for the best. We give them tools, training, support, and most importantly, respect. We treat them as partners, not charity cases. The questions continued for an hour. Rosa answered each one with confidence, backed by data and real stories. When it was over, the board voted unanimously to continue funding Second Chances and to expand it to other cities. That night, Rosa sat at her kitchen table in her new apartment, helping Sophia with her homework. Sophia was doing better in school now that she wasn't worried about where they would live or whether they would have enough to eat. She was taking piano lessons and had joined the school's math club. "Mama," Sophia said, looking up from her math. "Problems. Remember when we used to ask people for food outside restaurants?" "I remember," Rosa said. "Are you sad that we don't live in the old apartment anymore?" Rosa thought about it. "No, baby. I'm grateful for everything that happened to us, even the hard parts. If we hadn't gone through those hard times, we wouldn't be here now, helping other people. So sometimes bad things happen for good reasons. Sometimes. But more importantly, sometimes good people help each other when bad things happen. That's what makes the world a better place." A year later, Rosa and David stood outside the same restaurant where they had first met, but now they were there for a different reason. They were opening their third location for Second Chances, and Rosa had just been promoted to regional director. "Do you ever think about what would have happened if I hadn't thrown away that food that night?" David asked. Rosa smiled. "I think, we would have found each other eventually. Some connections are meant to happen. Any regrets?" David asked. Rosa looked at Sophia, who was now 9 years old and full of confidence and dreams. She looked at the dozens of families they had helped, the small businesses they had supported, the lives they had changed. "Only one," Rosa said. "I regret that it took me so long to ask for help. I spent so much time being ashamed of needing help that I almost missed the chance to get it. And now? Now I know that asking for help isn't weakness. It's the first step to strength, and helping others isn't charity, it's community." As they walked into the restaurant together, Rosa reflected on how much had changed. A year ago, she had been a desperate woman asking for scraps. Now she was a leader, a success story, and most importantly, someone who helped others find their own strength. The best part wasn't the money or the recognition or even the security. The best part was knowing that every day she was helping someone else take that first brave step from desperation to hope. And that, Rosa knew, was worth more than all the scraps in the world.